Either innovate or perish. That's the message that His Excellency has just passed on to us, and so true. I think we all know what happens if we don't innovate. One of the pioneers in that field is Dr. R. Chidambaram, a PhD and DSc from the prestigious Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. He joined the Baba Atomic Research Center in 1962 and became its director in 1990. He was chairman of Atomic Energy Commission and secretary to the Government of India in the Department of Atomic Energy from February 1993 to November 2000. He is currently the principal scientific advisor to the Government of India and chairman of the Scientific Advisory Committee to the Cabinet. Dr. Chidambaram is an experimental scientist who has contributed to many aspects of the nuclear program. He was chairman of the Board of Governors of the International Atomic Energy Agency during 94-95. Dr. Chidambaram has also won many awards, including the Padma Vibhushan in 1999. Dr. Chidambaram is a role model for all of us, and I thank him for having graced this occasion today. May I invite Dr. Chidambaram onto the dais to say a few words, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prince Arora. His Excellency Ambassador Lokesh, Mr. Joseph Jose, Dr. Appukutan, Mr. Ananthakrishnan, distinguished alumni of NITs and their spouses, ladies and gentlemen, and also children. Some of you have brought your children. It's a great pleasure for me to be here with you, and I thought I'll share some of my thoughts with you of India's development goals. There is no doubt that India will become a developed country sooner or later. Sooner rather than later, if all of us put our acts together. And here is where I see a very important role of for NITs and also NIT alumni who are both in India and abroad, a very important role for them. Now, after I got the invitation from Mr. Jose and strongly endorsed by the ambassador, he said, "You must come." I looked back and saw how many of these NIT alumni I have close contact with. 30 of them now. The numbers have grown, just the numbers of IITs has grown. And we are proud of our NITs, just as we are of our IITs. There are many distinguished alumni of NITs, and of course the present Chief Minister of Bihar. Bihar is one of them. But if I look at some of the alumni with whom I have had close interaction, the former director of the Indira Gandhi Center for Atomic Research, Dr. Baldev Raj, a very distinguished metallurgist from NIT Raipur, the former Power Secretary Shahi, with whom I have shared the stage in many meetings, NIT Jamshedpur, the present CEO of TCS, Chandrasekaran from NIT Trichy, and so on. And I'm sure there are many more. For a long time I didn't know that Baldev Raj from one of the NITs. So maybe there are many more about their educational background I might not have known. I asked Professor Sundarajan, who is the director of NIT, to tell me a little bit about how they started. And he said that the genesis of the NITs, the earlier ones, the erstwhile regional engineering colleges, almost all of them were set up in rural surroundings with a view to developing the local environment. See, one of my definitions of a developed India is when the quality of life in rural India becomes comparable to the quality of life in the non-urban areas of already developed countries. Unless we achieve that, And here I see the way the earlier NITs were set up, and maybe some of the new ones also, that they can play a very important role in rural development. Also, many of them were set up alongside greenfield industrial sites. Many of these initiatives, as your ambassador mentioned, started by Panditji. Number of new industries started coming up, the steel plants and electrical equipment plants and all that. Now REC, this is only an example, is one such institution which is alongside BHEL Trichy today. And I was told by CMD of BHEL, they do have a very strong interaction with NIT Trichy. Another distinctive feature he felt was that of the REC system, that all of them were homegrown. They were not set up in collaboration with foreign countries, as like some of the IITs, earlier IITs. Of course, there is no harm in international collaboration. We must collaborate, and all the NITs together do have international linkages. But he's talking about the startup. And today, according to him, NIT Trichy is being consistently ranked among the top technology schools in the country. And it can be classified as one of the largest suppliers of engineers to the nation. Same thing is true for you also, Dr. Abukuttan? See, India wants to become a knowledge economy, not just a developed economy, but a developed economy which is driven by knowledge. So we need a mix of high quality basic research. High quality we must have. You can't build a superstructure without a foundation. And that foundation is provided by basic research, to which I have written about it. I also add what I call directed basic research. See, on the basis of some kind of technology foresight analysis at any level, you can decide which are those technologies India can become a leader. Technology foresight is different from technology forecasting. You can ask a question, is there a missile which is coming at us? Can you neutralize it by impact by another missile? You can ask and answer this question purely from a science and technology point of view. That is technology forecasting. You can ask, will human cloning work? And if you ask and answer it purely from a scientific point of view, it becomes technology forecasting. But if you add to such analysis an assessment based on India's needs, India's social cultural environment, and India's economic situation, and decide that India should enter this field, then it becomes technology foresight. Foresight is forecasting accompanied by a very detailed assessment, and you can do it at any level. For example, if I look at the whole of India, what are the critical technologies for India? There will be strategic technologies, nuclear and space, defense-related technologies, advanced manufacturing, advanced materials, biotechnology, and new nanotechnology, information technology. But equally important are technologies which are related to the development of micro, small and medium enterprises. And equally important is the development of technologies and delivery of technologies. Rural development, the problem seems to be more with technology delivery than even research and development. All this, these all become critical technologies for India. Now, research generates knowledge, and it has to be engineered into a product. That's where quality engineering comes in. And NITs have to play a very important role in this. Of course, accompanied by applied research. Applied research can be pre-competitive, and that becomes the business of the government. Take any technology, we have done it from our office. Any technology is beginning to grow, automotive for instance. Automotive technology, we created a core group for automotive R&D. Look at the generic problems in this technology: alternate fuels, combustion, lightweight alloys, hydroforming. Then it becomes pre-competitive, becomes the business of the government. But if it's a proprietary product development, it's not the business of the government. But the companies can interact with any academic institution. And I'm sure Thermax does that. You interact with it, but then you keep the IPR, you know. And if you are going to protect your IPR, it's not the business of the government. If government supports through an academic institution, then it resides with the academic institution, normally, because it is funded by the government. And in these cases, in the case of industrial development, what India needs is enhanced academia-industry interaction, enhanced academia. And this is what we are now trying to do. From our office, we did automotive, then we did machine tools. And now, which is the one we have missed so long, electronics hardware. Electronics hardware. Somehow we have slipped, because overall we have slipped in manufacturing, but the momentum is now picking up, but particularly in the case of electronics hardware. We had a core advisory group, which was co-chaired by Ajay Chowdhury from HCL and GP Srivastav from BAC. They asked, what are those killer applications which we can look for? Set-top boxes. Every TV has a set-top box. And this is going to grow, and this is something we should produce here. Tablets, smart meters, and so on. They have identified half a dozen areas. In each one of them, you should have an embedded system or a system on chip and all that sort of thing. And for all this, it has to be backed by a strong manufacturing infrastructure. Enough to generate knowledge, not enough to do applied research, but you must have a manufacturing base. And as I see the way NITs have grown, and also IITs of course, that you can provide, and it can't be done unless you have the right kind of manpower. NITs can play a very important role. Now, for this, as the ambassador mentioned, you also need a proper research and innovation ecosystem. Research and innovation ecosystem. Research generates new knowledge. Innovation adds economic value to knowledge, strategic value, or societal benefit, or a mix of them to knowledge. Even knowledge generated by somebody else. In the early 70s, there used to be a joke that UK got the Nobel Prizes, Japan got wealthy. You know, somebody else's knowledge, but they were making money out of that. Automobile manufacturing. Of course, that was innovation, not so much product innovation, but process innovation. Sometimes process innovation, it has been talked about, can beat product innovation. And you combine with it design, it can beat both of them, process plus design. Now, we must have an ecosystem which encourages both research in all its dimensions, basic research, applied research, and at the same time, we must also promote innovation. The first thing that you need there is talented young people, some of whom we rewarded here, because our problem also is not only India's problem, how to retain the most talented in science, or most talent that is at the +2 level. And those who are very talented in engineering, research and product development, how to retain them in engineering research and technology and technology development. Number of things are being done. And then we must inspire program, or the DST has attempted to do this, to reward, to identify and reward talented people, young people. And to companies, we had a meeting, a brainstorming in our office some years back. We were advising them that when you hire people through placement interviews, the creamy layer among them, I'm talking to you also, that the creamy layer among them Pay them job salaries, but let them do research. With a professor for whom you have respect, in a broad area of interest to the company. Not problem solving, that can go on, 6-month, 9-month project. This young fella, after his B.Tech or even M.Tech, should be no different from any other student or the professor. And you see, subconsciously he is loyal to the company because you are paying him 3 times the fellowship he would otherwise get. 2 professors talk to one another, one fellow from abroad and one fellow from India. They tell each other everything. 2 company scientists to talk to each other, they tell each other nothing. Because commercial value of the knowledge and IPR issues and so on and so forth. Because the professor from abroad comes and addresses your NIT audience students. Says, look, I can't tell you because this I am doing it for DuPont, that I can't tell you because doing the students will boo him down. And when these professors are exchanging information, the young fellow is listening. And you know, the PhD student of a professor is an entirely different category than a B.Tech or M.Tech student. Because he spends days with him, goes to his house, knows the family, probably helps the family to buy vegetables also when nobody is around. So in all that situation, the relationship of the professor with the student is very, very, very different. And if you treat that student well, the professor becomes your friend. And every company, in my opinion, must have 2 or 3 such friendly professors through whom you can reach probably everything in India. And this ecosystem, of course, is not only students. It also requires top quality professors. It needs proper funding. And today what we are developing in India, I'll show it in one of my last slides, you need an e-science infrastructure, electronic connectivity, so that people all get connected using an optical fiber network. See, if you have that ecosystem, what I'm talking about here, it is also required if you want to build major facilities for science. The way Raman did his experiment, when he discovered the Raman effect, it was just one scientist, Raman. Of course, the greatest experimental physicist India has produced, plus 2 or 3 students. But today they want to go and look for the Higgs boson. They build a $4 billion machine. $4 billion machine to look for one particle, which of course was a very important particle in the Standard Model. When the Big Bang occurred, all these particles were produced. And according to the Standard Model, they didn't have a mass. It is the Higgs field which gave them the mass. So the Higgs boson. And boson comes because our Bose was one of the persons who said this. Suddenly they called it a God particle. Of course, every particle is a God particle, if you are a believer. And the story goes, and I have confirmed it, that there was a scientist called Leon Lederman. I don't know if Ambassador has heard this story. Leon Lederman, who had been hunting for the Higgs boson for 15 years, he didn't find it. So in disgust he wrote an article and said, I've been looking for this goddamned particle for 15 years and have not found it. So the editor said, you know, you can't put damn and all in the science, so remove the damned. So it became a God particle. That's what they say. And I have confirmed it with the CERN people. Because as I said, if you are a believer, every particle is a God particle. If you are not a believer, nothing is a God particle. So it's a different, the way you approach it here. But coming back to this, and you know how they do these experiments. They're looking for the Higgs boson. They have a tunnel, some of you may know, 100 meters below the ground in Geneva. 26 kilometers in circumference, 100 meters below the ground. They accelerate protons, that's why they call this a hadron. They go in opposite directions, in circles, and they accelerate it to tera electron volts, 4 tera electron volts. 1000 times million is a giga electron volt. 1,000 times giga is a tera electron volt. And once in a while, they collide. And when they collide, energy is lost. And now you read Einstein's equation the wrong way. E is equal to mc squared. Destroy mass, you produce energy, nuclear energy. Now you destroy energy, you produce mass. This is how they do high energy experimental physics. And the higher the energy of the colliding particles, no, don't worry, it's nothing important, nothing important. The higher the energy of the colliding particles, the higher is the energy of the new particle they produce. And they needed this kind of energy because the Higgs boson has a mass something like 120, 130 times the mass of the proton. And India has contributed for this Large Hadron Collider $40 million worth of equipment. $40 million worth. 1,000 superconducting sextupole magnets. These are, see, the bending of the particle, charged particle, is done by dipole magnets. But the focusing of the particle, if you have any corrections, that is done by sextupole and decapole magnets. Those were supplied by India, designed by the Rajaramana Center for Atomic Technology, Advanced Technology, made by an Indian company. So Indian companies can make precision engineered equipment of this quality now, high quality engineering, what I was talking to you about. And they haven't put all these magnets into a $4 billion machine just because they love Indians. Because the product India offered was better than anything else that they could get. So we are in a regime now, we are approaching a regime where our engineering is high precision engineering, the kind of equipment we need for nuclear power plants or for missiles or for space launch vehicles, all that can now be built in India. And here, see, the two detectors found the Higgs boson. One is called the CMS, that is the compact muon solenoid, and it's a large international team which looks at the data from these experiments. Of course, when they say we saw the Higgs boson, doesn't mean they saw the particle. They saw the signature of the particle. When it decays, how will it decay? This is a theoretically computer simulated patterns. And once they saw similar patterns, they knew the Higgs boson was coming. Higgs boson had probably, of course now they are continuously confirming it, and they have not found anything against that conclusion. It's also coming from the other detector. Tata Institute of Fundamental Research, along with 10 other universities, are partners in this compact muon solenoid experiment. All the data from there comes to India, live. And it is possible because we have this optical fiber network, National Knowledge Network as we call it, which has been now established in India. All NITs are connected, all IITs are connected, many universities are connected. We want to connect something like 1,500 knowledge institutions. About 1,000 are already connected. And this project is implemented by the National Informatics Center in Delhi, and they have done a marvelous job of putting it all up. See, we have got, if you look at it, this is the Large Hadron Collider. There are many other facilities like synchrotron radiation sources. You take an electron, very high energy electron, giga electron volt, make it go round and round in a circle, because you are accelerating it, because changing the direction. Speed is the same, but direction is changing. And it emits a radiation which is called synchrotron radiation, which is a continuous spectrum. And the peak of the spectrum will depend on the energy of the electron. And the X-ray beam that you can get out of which is thousands of times stronger than a beam you get from a rotating anode source, X-ray source. And you can also change the wavelength. So it becomes a very important experimental facility. Or other kinds of particle accelerators, research reactors, telescopes, or you look for neutrino observatory. Put it all together. Scientists alone cannot do it. It has to be done with the help of engineers in a multidisciplinary engineering teams. So when you look for phenomena of this type or want to do experiments with what are called mega science facilities, the scientific community and the engineering community has begun to come closer. Now, having got the beam, you must build the beam line, protein crystallography beam line. Proteins, anything that you can crystallize, you can solve the structure. You can now crystallize proteins, you can crystallize viruses. And you know, our guy, our Indian, Venki Ramakrishnan, who got the Nobel Prize, he solved the structure of one of the subunits of the ribosome. Ribosome is the protein factory in the human body. Produces all the 30,000 proteins or whatever that the human body needs. And one of the subunits is the most complex structure solved by anybody. That use synchrotron radiation sources and all the diffraction equipment that you need. And you know, it is both research and innovation. Pure research in the sense that it is the most complex structure solved. But it is also innovation because he has solved the complexes of ribosome with antibiotics. And hopefully it has given a roadway for seeing how new antibiotics can be manufactured, depending on. That's why, of course, Venki Ramakrishnan got the Nobel Prize. We have a synchrotron source in Indore, which is called Indus 2. And we have built a beam line here. But we are now also, my friend Milan Sanyal has built a beam line at the photon factory in Tsukuba, that is in Japan. So we bought a beam line, the time in a beam line. Oh, we own the beam line actually, and this is the instrument that is built here. Now, it's one instrument which can do this kind of, diffuse scattering from solid and liquid surfaces and surface, all this kind of thing, decorated nanoparticles. And in that photon factory, this is the only beam line which can do that. So all the Japanese scientists will also use it. So this is the trend now. The trend is scientists can't do that experiments without engineers, and also we are getting internationalized. It's not getting limited to one country. There are statistics to show that the number of authors in a paper is rising steeply. Something like the Higgs boson may have 300 authors, maybe 1,000 authors. That's the kind of limit. But also the number of authors in any paper are coming from more than one country now. More than one country. Of course, we are happy that Venki Ramakrishnan got the prize because he is an Indian. He did his MSc in Baroda. So Indians are happy. He switched to biology in California. So maybe Americans are happy. Then he came to Cambridge to do the experiment, and for which he got the Nobel Prize, which is now listed under UK's name. So obviously the Englishmen are happy. So it's all, and who are the students? Maybe one Englishman. There might have been other people of other nationalities in his team. This is what is happening now. Internationalization of science. And we are also allowing a giant meter radio telescope near Pune. We are allowing people to come from various countries and to use that experiment. See, as I said, we missed the microelectronics revolution, so we are very keen that we shouldn't miss the nanoelectronics one. So 6-7 years back, we had a brainstorming in our office. One is to fund research at the level of 1 crore, 2 crores to support, or what few crores, to support who are all the good scientists in India. But we are now also beginning to feel that if you want to create centers of excellence, you must spend at least 50 crores in particular areas. So what we thought was, in nanoelectronics, suppose we had to decided to spend 100 crores, and you want to select 2 labs where it can be done. Selection was Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, and IIT Bombay. With an MOU between them, and there's Indian Nanoelectronics Users Program. See, when we talk of mega fabs being established in the country, it must also be backed by backed by this kind of high quality research manpower being generated in the country. Maybe between them you must also have a prototype fab. India's strength is in low volume, high design content chips. Not like my friend from Stanford said, jelly bean chips. CPU and memory chips, very difficult to penetrate the market. But if you have fabulous design capability in which Indians are very, very strong, you also provide a fabrication facility. It doesn't look for high volume, low volume but high design content. But if that kind of thing has to be backed by this. And in the longer term, of course, we can be all over the internationalization of science. Take the Space Department. Not many of you may know that ISRO has launched 35 satellites from 19 countries using the Polar Satellite Launch Vehicle so far. And this very important one for studying the water cycle with the French one, studying energy exchanges and all that, which is really an oceanographic satellite is meant for this study. From all countries, various countries, from Argentina, Singapore, Switzerland, UK and so on. If you want to have a tsunami warning system, it has to be an international effort. The underground earthquake which generates the tsunami may be very far away from you. So what the Ministry of Earth Sciences, Dr. Shailesh Nayak's group in Delhi, so they have customized it for the Indian Ocean region. This kind of Indian tsunami warning system. It's a very high resolution, gives you very fast things. And then you have a network of national systems consisting of regional tsunami service providers and national regional tsunami watch centers, which can all be get together. I'm giving examples of...
Thank you very much, sir. May I request Mr. Ranjit to present a memento to Dr. Chidambaram. Thank you so much, sir. It's very difficult to summarize what Dr. Chidambaram has said, because he moved from one topic to the other and has enlightened us, and I'm sure for a person like him, 40 minutes to 50 minutes is actually insufficient. I think we can just go on for the entire day, with awe, hearing him and his stories. In a gist, what he actually said was, India is poised to be in the rightful position to become a knowledge-based economy. There are already steps that has been taken in that area, like the NKN that he was talking about, and it is just a collaboration of the academics and the industry in a more interesting manner that can help, or in a more fruitful manner that can help it take to the next level.